So we're going to start our session today. Hi, everyone. Happy to have you here with um, another session of the SDUI marathon. My name is Mohammed. I'm going to be the moderator today with you today. Currently working as an SHO in the Mater Hospital in Dublin, first year of the BSc program. As many of us know from personal experience, the role of the NCHD be very demanding. It's essential, and we're the front line of the patient care. Um, we face um, long working hours navigating the complex rota and a huge share of responsibility. Working through these conditions, we have challenges related to the working condition, the training opportunities, the well-being, and our professional rights as well. Um, these factors not affect us only as doctors, but also affect the quality and the safety of the care that we provide to our patients. That's why today it's a very important session, in my belief, um, addressing these um, factors to reflect the right of the NCHDs and to have better understanding about this. I'm happy today to host Mr. Tom Smith, a member of the IMO, the Irish Medical Organization, and the manager of Member Advisory Service in the IMO. He will guide us today through this topic and share a few insights on where these things are currently standing and the steps that are being taken to protect and strengthen our rights as an NCHDs in Ireland. Um, and the mic is yours now, Tom.
Lovely. Thank you very much for the very kind introduction. And I'd absolutely echo what you said there. Being an NCHD is obviously a very rewarding job. I work with many of your colleagues, but it's also very challenging. And depending where you are, at again, and I think the asks are only increasing, they're never decreasing. So I suppose as the IMO, and I work very closely with the NCHD committee, it is our aim to try and keep improving conditions for NCHDs. So again, that's what I'm going to try and go through this evening is to go through the contract, go through. So I think the key thing to know your entitlements at the very least, and to push for them. So go through the contractual entitlements you have there, and then hopefully to answer any questions you might have about them. So that's kind of my aim for this evening. So I'll just share my slides if that's okay, and hopefully this will all work. Um, Perfect. So again, just to discuss what I'm going to go through is the role of the IMO, and then I'm going through the following topics, which I hope will be of kind of use in relation to your leave. Pay is very important. Incremental credit is related. What are the supports you have in relation to your education? Talk about compulsory rest, some of the employment protections. I think you've kind of touched on that there, and to make sure you're protected both from a contractual perspective and what are the other protections available. Then I'll talk a little bit about what we're trying to do in contract talks to improve things. And again, I'm open to any thoughts you might have in that respect, and then to deal with any questions at the end, if that's okay. So, again, the role of the IMO. So the IMO is a trade union. We're the only body who can negotiate on behalf of NCHDs. Obviously, there are other bodies, being the colleges, being a principal one, but we negotiate contracts. We reach agreements on behalf of our members. So that means when we reach an agreement, we then put it out to members to ballot, and if accepted by a majority, that will then become the contractual position. We also ballot members in relation to taking industrial action. We had to ballot most recently in 2022, where we balloted for potential strike action. And based on that, we got into talks and got 2022 agreement, which has a number of improvements for members. And then the other key part of what we do is we represent members individually with their employers. That's in relation to either challenging, for example, pay, leave, difficulties they might have, or representing NCHDs who get into difficulty, which does happen as you know as well. So that's kind of a key role, and that's what my team would do, is they would assist members individually. So then leave, and again, this is something, given the challenge, given the toughness of the job and the pressures, we would massively encourage people, particularly in relation to annual leave, to make sure you're taking it. It's there, it's an entitlement. Make sure you take that leave. So it can get a bit confusing. The annual leave is quite a confusing piece, and it's a bit different to what you'd normally expect. So NCHD annual leave is 12 days per 6 months or 24 days for the entire year. Um, and then the other piece then is the public holidays, which makes it more difficult. There are 10 public holidays in Ireland at the moment. The most recent that was added was the February public holiday. And NCHDs are awarded those up front. So you will often be told at the start of 6 months you have 17 days of annual leave. That is your 12 days plus your five public holidays. Okay. And then how that actually operates in practice is if you work a public holiday, so you work the first Monday in June, for example, you then get paid double pay for that, which I'll come back to, but you still have your day to take at another time. But if you're rostered off on that Monday, you should have a choice. You either use one of your days leave and get paid for that as another annual leave day, or you take it as an unpaid day and take it at another time. And that's something that's a bit different to it's a bit outside the norm. And that's something we have to people query all the time. And sometimes their employers aren't applying it correctly. So that's something just to be aware of and that entitlement because it is so it's 34, it's effectively you have 17 days every 6 months if you're planning your leave ahead. Okay. Then the next thing is maternity leave, and again, NCHD maternity leave is a bit different. Usually, if somebody is on a fixed term contract and once their contract ends, they then don't get paid. For NCHDs, if you go on maternity leave before the end of your contract, you'll get paid the full 26 weeks. Okay, so that's just something to a very important piece, just to be aware of. And frequently for people who don't have a new contract coming up, they often end up taking very early maternity leave. So they might go up like maybe 16, 17 weeks before they're due to get maternity leave. And that's something we support people in getting and advising because the worst thing is to your contract ends and not to get paid anything.
Mm.
Again, paternity leave is 2 weeks, just to be aware of it. Again, parents' leave is up to 9 weeks in the first 2 weeks of your child's life. So that's for both parents. Um, Parental leave, it's 26 weeks. So it's quite a lot for the parents there, just to be aware of. Parents' leave and parental leave are unpaid. You can get so, but they are there. And as an NCHD, you're entitled to them. And that's something people don't might forget about and go, well, they don't apply to me. They absolutely do. You're the same as any other employee. You're fully entitled to these things. A big one, and you talked about training, is your educational leave or your study leave. Okay. So the maximum entitlement is 18 days per 6 months. I'll be honest, I don't think many people take the full 18 days. And maybe they might do if they're at a specific point in their training or they have specific exams. But as part of our most recent agreement, we secured entitlement that everyone is entitled to at least a minimum of 10 days if they have qualifying activities. So if you have material, so people absolutely go and when you start and you're looking in January, February, or July, August, plan out what you're doing, get your leave, take those things. That is something that was fought for and you should be absolutely getting. And the same as if you're being asked to do specific training or things, outside of hours, you should be able to get study leave for that. You know what I mean? Like there should all this kind of training that people are asked to do. Like one thing in July that you've all been through recently is all those hand washing courses, all the hygiene, all that kind of stuff to do. They should be giving you some study leave, some time to do it. I don't know. One NCT said he's done 20 hand washing courses in the last 3 years. Do you know what I mean? So that kind of thing comes up all the time, but they should be giving you time. Um, Again, sick leave, just be aware it is there. Hopefully, it won't apply, but you are entitled to it. It is generally up to 90 days at full pay and 91 days at half pay in a 4 year period. There is critical illness. It usually comes up, for example, fortunately with cancer is something people do get, and they get longer leave. Again, we help members wait it when it comes up. And I'd also mention there, you can get income protection. That kind of thing is something to look at as well to think about for the future that you may want to have income protection in case you do get sick. And again, I suppose we do have financial advisors you can discuss if that's something you want to look at or consider. But it is something to think about now. Hopefully, when you're all healthy and to make those decisions now. So again, what kind of questions do we get about leave? Cancelling of leave. If you've booked leave and you've made a commitment, especially, it shouldn't be cancelled unilaterally. Like that is a big thing, and we often have to take that up on behalf of members once it's been approved. Getting time off for exams. especially gateway exams. You're entitled to 5 days off before the exam. Generally, it's the 5 days before it, if not within 2 or 3 weeks, if they can't accommodate it. Like for example, there was a number of people in one department doing it, but you should be getting that time off, and we've had to push that for people. The third big thing is generally the public holidays. Again, I advise you of it there. It's very confusing. It's a bit different. So we're frequently telling people about that and often telling HR how it's supposed to work as well. So that's quite a common one. And then one you
Yeah.
mightn't be aware of, notional overtime. So when you take a week's annual leave, they are supposed to include an average of your rostered overtime in that. Now, a lot of hospitals pay it at the end of your rotation, but it is something there, and we do kind of remind people usually towards the end of rotations about it. So, like that's actually money you may be due and not getting. And I suppose that's a big thing for my job. I want to make sure anything the HC owes you, you get. I always see that as a
Not an
win.
easy job.
No, not at all, not at all. But that's something just to be aware of. People don't know about. Now, it's your rostered overtime, not all your overtime. But if you're doing so, but it is something you may not be getting. So then to talk about pay, which I think is obviously very important. So I just did this as looking at for something else, just to see kind of NCHG salaries and how they've progressed since say 2006, because the IMO has negotiated both on an individual basis and with other unions, and I suppose just to kind of see the progression of salaries and kind of we have progressed. Obviously, there's been inflation over all those times, but we have felt we have been able to improve terms and conditions for NCHTs and particularly the pay, which is obviously very important because we want to attract people here, we want to keep people here, and like obviously there's a lot of costs involved with being an NCHD, and obviously progressing hopefully through to consultants or GPs or other areas. So here, just to give you the salary scales, just so you're aware of them, these were increased as of August 2025. So these are the most current ones. I think they should be up to date now. There is some delays in paying increases, but I understand they will be paid in September. But if they haven't been paid yet, they will be paid with arrears. But if anyone's not sure about it, that's again something to get into at imo.ie and we can come back to you. But you'll see there the incremental scales going through from intern all the way through up to SO and SPR7. So then it's just the key rates in relation to it and the really important things. Overtime, how it works. So overtime is paid at time and a half. And it's calculated on a 2 weekly basis. So for every 2 weeks, all hours you do over 78 are overtime. If you did 100 hours, you should be getting 22 hours at time and a half. That's just a way to look at it. It's often paid monthly, in my experience. So while it might be calculated on a fortnightly basis, it's paid on a monthly basis. That's kind of what I often see. Every 2 weeks you get normal pay, and then every 4 weeks you get your overtime.
Yeah.
Um, the second piece then is your Sunday public holiday premium. So that's paid at double time. They call it single time extra. It's double time. That's really just the kind of easiest way to see it. The next one then is night rate. So that is, it doesn't cover 24-hour shifts, but it covers shifts which are becoming more common of between, like, say, 8 and 8. Right, you're doing those shifts going from 8 in the evening to 8 in the morning. If a shift has 3 hours between midnight and 7, then it generally qualifies. So again, that's time and a quarter for all those hours. I suppose the expectation is there. You should have less overtime if you're doing those night shifts, so that's why you're getting a premium there. But a key rule is the best premium will always apply. So if an hour could be paid at night rate or overtime or Sunday premium, it'll be paid at Sunday premium. So the best premium always applies. They don't stack, unfortunately, but the best premium always applies. And just for the Sunday piece, say you're working overnight from Saturday into a Sunday, as soon as you hit midnight on Sunday, the premium rate applies. Unfortunately, as soon as you hit midnight on the Sunday going into the Monday, it stops applying. But that's just generally how that works. On call off site, again, it varies how much this comes up. You see it a good bit in psychiatry, to be honest, one of the areas you see it most. It's a little bit convoluted how it works, but for on call off site, half of the hours up to 10 are paid at time and a quarter, and the other half are paid at half time. So that's kind of how it works. Again, we'd often have to explain to people how it comes through. And that's when you're sitting at home and you might be called in and have to be available to work. But once you're called in, the normal rules apply after that. And then the final one, again, which is quite situational, is the emergency shift premium. So that's for people on a kind of rolling 24-hour shift in an emergency department, and they get paid time and a six for every hour. So again, it's only an emergency department, only for those specific shifts. We actually had to deal with it in Galway where they weren't paying anyone it in the emergency department. So again, they just said, "Oh, we didn't know about it." So that's the kind of thing that comes up. Um, so again, what comes up again? Receiving appropriate pay, fairly obvious. What we do for members is we help them assess timesheets. So people send in their timesheets and their pay slips, and we do a comparison against both and identify any issues or errors, which does happen a lot. Delays in payments, this is a bigger thing. Overtime not being paid on a prompt basis, 2 or 3 months in arrears. And I suspect to see a good bit of it towards the end of the year. When hospitals are running up against budgets, they often try and target the NCHDs and push it into next year. So that's kind of something we will be very much on top of coming into the year. Emergency tax, understanding it, how to avoid it, the temporary recoverable payment, which is a payment you're supposed to get if you're being emergency taxed, which kind of addresses the net effect of it. You get basically an extra payment into your gross salary that's netted down to affect the deficit, the difference, and then it's taken out of your gross salary when you get your emergency tax back. That's something we had to agree with HC to address that because everyone's getting emergency tax and they have all these other bills. Your medical council is due, you're putting a deposit on an apartment, all this kind of stuff. So that's supposed to address some of that. And the last issue that's come up, and it's kind of the opposite, is overpayments. We've seen a lot of overpayments in the last while, which is people being paid in the wrong scale, people who they kept paying after they finished work, even though they told them to stop. So we've seen more of that in the last probably 6 months, 9 months. Unfortunately, you have to pay it back. That's just a fact. If you're overpaid, you do have to pay the money back. But there's different rules about revenue. If you pay back in the current year, reasonable a time period. So that's something we've seen an awful lot more of in the last while. So that's just something I'm very to just to contact us if it does happen, so you know the rules. Because frequently people just get a letter saying we're going to deduct the money tomorrow, like next week. And that's not in line with it. So it's that kind of thing comes up more, which often feels counterintuitive that you're looking to pay back money, but such is life. Incremental credit then is kind of the next piece, and it's quite related to pay. So again, you get credit for certain degrees. So if you've done something before you did medicine, like a health science or maybe like nursing, physiotherapy, something else, you can get credit for that. Prior experience outside of Ireland in a recognized training hospital. Experience earned as an NCHD. Obviously, every year you should be moving up to scale. And then for masters, if you took time out to do a master's, but that master's say had a clinical element or you're doing some part-time work or something like that, you can get credit for it. You can't afford to get 2 points of credit at one time. So you couldn't be working as an SHO and doing a master's and get 2 points of credit. It's one at a time. But if you took that time out and maybe did some sessions, or again, it was a master's with a placement, you can get credit for that. So again, that's the kind of thing just to be aware of. And it's just obviously you'll see moving up the scales is quite good, especially as the scales are also increasing with the public service agreements over time. So then the next piece then is the most common issues we get are obviously getting credit. Are you receiving the appropriate credit? Have you been credited appropriately again? Assessing. So a lot of what we do is someone to send us their CV, we would assess what point on the scale they should be on. You know what I mean? And that's something, again, if you're unsure, get in touch and we can see what point on the scale you should be in based on the rules above. And then moving between grades. So if you're moving between SHO and Reg, or you're maybe going back into a training scheme from Reg to SHO, moving up to SPO or SO, how do those interact? And what point on the scale you should be on. So that's kind of that's very important and a lot of queries there. And I found people kind of making a lot more probably making decisions to change career at different point. Getting so far maybe in surgery and then going to actually know what general practice is what I want. You know what I mean? That kind of thing is happening more. So you certainly see more people moving in that fashion. So then talking about your supports and what kind of educational supports are available to you. And these are all based on having the contract. So once you have the contract, you're entitled to most of these. So obviously, this is the sum of money you have per annum, and it's a training year. So from July to July, you have again, I presume most here are probably SHOs or registrars. You have 1750 to claim, and then for SPRs, GP Regs, which is year 3 and 4, and Psych SRs, it's 2,500. So again, that's a fund there that's available to you to claim. And again, I'd be encouraging people to check their balance and make sure they're using it, especially if they're spending the expense. So then it covers courses, it covers unsuccessful attempts at exams. And that was kind of a key increase in a few years ago to go like, and often the reason people are unsuccessful in these exams because they're working lots of hours and can't get study leave and that type of thing. You can claim up to, I think, a 750 for a laptop or a tablet once every 4 years. Just a health warning on that. If you do that, you will face a tax bill. You'll face benefit in kind
Mm.
on it. So that's just something just to be aware of when you're doing it. It is you're still getting obviously it's a good benefit, but just to be aware of it. Software, so for Microsoft Office or certainly like I think SPSS, some people use for stats, that type of thing you can claim. And then related accommodation costs. So if you're going to a course or a conference, you can get subsistence, you can get travel, that type of thing, right? So just to be aware in that respect to your and again you're claiming it as an entitlement. It's kind of part of your package. So if you're doing those things, make sure you're getting it. CSERS is it covers mandatory courses, for example, ACLS, if it's not provided by your hospital, that type of thing, you can get on CSERS and successful exam attempts. It's not a fund or a budget in the same way. So there's not a maximum you can claim. Now, obviously, you're not going to be doing 10 ACLSs a year, but it is there and it covers the full amount of those things. For those who are not on a training scheme, there is this a CPD SS scheme. And again, that's run by the NDTP. Most of this is run by the NDTP. And again, because obviously if you're on a training scheme, your professional competence is covered. If you're not on a training scheme, this assists with meeting those requirements. And then the HST scheme. So this is a fund of €500 per annum for those on the HST. So that's your SPRs, SRs, and GP trainees in years 3 and 4. This is something we actually recently with the NDTP had to engage very strongly because they tried to amend it unilaterally. Now they do want to change the scheme and probably tie it in with the others, and that's something we will be doing during the year. But for those of you who are SPRs, SRs, or GP trainees, just to be aware of it. It is claimed through the colleges. It is administered by them, but it's more flexible than the other schemes. You can claim equipment and that type of thing on it. Again, just another thing to be aware of, that is there. So again, what do we face? Delays in payment. A colleague of mine has been dealing with Connolly about long delays in payment. So that's kind of a key thing because this is all supposed to be paid generally within 6 to 8 weeks. Claims being rejected inappropriately, sites trying to move it from one side to the other, saying, oh, they should cover it, not us, that type of thing. And again, understanding the entitlements, this type of thing, talking to people about it. What are your entitlements? How should you be claiming? Should it be under TSS? Should it be under CSERS? You know what I mean? So you can maximize your entitlement. So that's kind of the main things we absolutely face there. Then moving on, and this is based on the 2022 agreement, and this is kind of it's related to pay and the agreement, and I suppose a discussion earlier about the working days that people have. So if you work, so this came in at the agreement when it came in, people were saying they're working 18, 20, 25 days in a row. So we looked at ways to break that up and to break that level of days. So now if you work 10 or 11 days in a row, you are entitled to rest days. If you work 3 24-hour shifts, you're entitled to a rest day. That is supposed to be extra time off. That is the hope. Now, often if you're doing that level of days in a row, there probably isn't scope in the schedule for you to get extra rest. The kind of number of days. So people if you can't, you can claim after 4 weeks. You can claim for payment for those days. The HC has paid out hundreds of thousands in compensatory rest since this came in January 2023. We actually haven't even seen the numbers for the voluntary hospitals. The HSE hospitals have paid out hundreds of thousands. So that kind of shows, and that's kind of evidence of the level of hours being worked. The second piece and the second break there is every second weekend must be rostered off. You're entitled to have your second, and that's from on call off site as well. So there should be a hard break of 12 days in a row. You shouldn't be able to work more than 12 days in a row because of every second weekend off. And if you're not getting that, let us know. That's something we can absolutely take up. It's a very clear contractual entitlement. So again, common queries not getting paid. Um, Again, I got an email across my desk today where a site were saying, oh, if you did 12 days and 3 24-hour shifts, you only get one of those two entitlements. And that's not what the agreement says. And that's again across my desk earlier today. And I had to go to National HR to say, like, this has been applied incorrectly. Being asked to work more than 12 days. And again, taking it up, asked to work consecutive weekends. What are the rostering rules? How should I be rostered? So then just go on to kind of general employment protections. Again, as an NCHD, you are under all the normal employment legislation. You're fully protected as an employee. So to give you kind of a context, actually one of the big ones is like, say, for example, Fixed Term Workers Act, how that applies, particularly for people who might be in long-term service posts. Again, equality, I spoke about all the maternity leave, parental leave, paternity leave, that all applies to you as an NCHD. The grievance and disciplinary procedures in the HSE, the dignity at work policies. If you're so minded, there's hundreds of pages of policies you can read in the HSE that go through all your entitlements, and we often have to walk people through those. But I suppose the key message I want you to take away is they all apply to you. You're not somehow outside those protections because you're an NCHD, because you're a doctor, or because sometimes you might be transient because you're on a training scheme. Do you know what I mean? And that's sometimes kind of the big piece. People go, no, and sometimes HR or other staff might go, well, they're just moving through. We don't need to worry. That's a really big message I want you to take away. And what do? We assist NCHDs who are sometimes in difficult situations or having a challenge with their training, that type of thing, and find it difficult. We represent them through formal processes, even if they're responding to a complaint or they're complaining. And we help them through the process, both sides, and advising of their rights. That's really the key piece. And like often trying to give them both the right-based advice and also pragmatic advice too. We'd like to go, well, this is probably the best, or this is how we would approach this. And we would have engage informally with the HR as well as engaging formally. So that's kind of what we do. We have a team who would do that in the IMO. And then just kind of just to discuss briefly the contracts, and then hopefully I can answer your questions. So contract talks are due to resume. Hopefully this month. Now we're in October. Biggest working hours is an absolutely key issue about that, making it more sustainable for people. Improving training support, addressing the cost of training, and I suppose something. And again, you might have views or things you might say to be here. How better support international doctors who are working in Ireland. I suppose because obviously, like you're an absolutely essential part of the system, and it's kind of again, how do we make it more attractive for you? How do we give you a career paths? You know what I mean? That's absolutely
Yeah, yeah,
essential.
yeah,
Um, so again, just I suppose from I have to give you the bit of the IMO plug. Again, the support of our members what allows us to negotiate and support NCHDs. Again, the IMO, I always say, what is it? We are you. Because we are the doctors, we're a membership organization. We're not a third party, we're not some random group. Our membership rates are less than 1% of salary before overtime. So that's just to give you a picture where we are. I would say most members pay by direct debit, and that's how we want people to pay. We don't want people to give us a one check. We'd rather people pay on a direct debit basis. It's more affordable. And again, if you are interested, there is a QR code there, so you can sign up or go to the IMO website, imo.ie, and join. If you do have any queries, email nchds at imo.ie. You can mention obviously my talk this evening, but we'd delighted to, for anyone who's not a member, to welcome you in, and look, your support hopefully can help us achieve more. And then finally, my last plug, we're running a conference this Friday for any members. We've got a great sign up rate, and we have a really good agenda. We're talking about NCHD entitlements. We're talking about AI and its future in healthcare. We're going to have two consultants and a GP talking about their paths through fellowship and to getting a consultant post, or getting a GMS list for the GP. And then we also have a session on kind of alternative paths people have taken in medicine. We have an army doctor, we have someone who talks about wilderness medicine, and we have our president is speaking about working in Nepal. So that's all I've got for you. I will stop sharing my screen now, and hopefully I will be able to answer your questions.
thank you, Tom. That's a very thorough presentation. I think you've covered all bases on
I
that.
hope so.
From the questions that I've already have, I think you went through most of them, including the leaves, the paternity leave, the maternity leaves. But just to give more details, for example, about the paternity leave, um, what's the duration for that leave to be valid? Like, is it usually within the first year, the second year,
The
or
paternity leave, yes, it is generally within. I can confirm the exact details for you here. It is paternity leave. It is generally, it's 2 weeks of it. You have to give 4 weeks notice of it. And sorry, I'm going to get the exact benefit the time. It's in the first 6 months. Apologies. So paternity leave is generally taken in the first six. So it's kind of the leave immediately. I think most people would take it quite soon after the child's been born.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
And that would be different than the parents' leave and the parental leave, is it?
yeah, so paternity leave is paid. So you will be paid your salary for paternity leave, whereas parents' leave, you will get social welfare, but you will not be paid a salary, and parental leave is unpaid.
Okay.
So parental leave is 26 weeks, and you can take
Yeah.
parental leave in what you can take it in two blocks, one each at least of 6 weeks. Or you take it in one block. Your employer has to grant it, but they can delay it once. But you can also agree to take it. You often will see people taking 1 day a week or something like that. Yeah, that's by agreement. You're allowed to take it in blocks, but if your employer agrees, you can take it in smaller segments.
Okay. Okay. And another bit that you already went through, but again, we need more details about, is the stress leave. It's a common issue that we face a lot of stress, and sometimes you feel like you need a bit of time off if
Mm.
everything is putting much of weight on you.
Yeah,
But we usually feel like taking a stress leave would leave a remark on your CV or an impression on your employer. It could affect your chances of having another employment in the same hospital or a training opportunity possibly in the future.
yeah, like you're absolutely not wrong. Like obviously, if you're ill and you're signed off, you should absolutely take leave. And our first thing would always to say to people is you need to put your own health first. And doctors are not good at that.
No,
You're not good at putting your own health first. There's a
no,
few things. Obviously, if you're certified off your doc, so if you are worried about that, and I think it is a legitimate concern, you could be signed off as unfit for work. Do you know what I mean? And you don't need to say stress leave or that kind of thing if that is your concern. You can be just signed off as unfit. They can send you to occupational health. There are protections about what should be shared or not, but I do accept hospitals are smaller places and Ireland's a small country too. So there is a balance, but you shouldn't be. You
yeah,
shouldn't be discriminated against for that. It shouldn't impact. But again, maybe try it's something to speak to your GP about as well if you do it, but you are entitled to say unfit for work. Do you know what I mean? They might send you
yeah,
occupational health then, but you are entitled to get a cert saying unfit for work. They don't need to know the specifics, at least in the first instance.
yeah, makes sense. That's great. Yeah. And the other bit is there's a huge pile of challenges that we face every time that we move from a different hospital to another.
Hmm.
The first of all is the emergency tax.
Yes.
Although this is something avoidable, it keeps happening. It's not something that's easy to deal with. It takes a huge chunk of your salary each month for the first 2 or sometimes 3, unless you contact the payroll and revenue. It's a very long process.
It
How would you
absolutely is.
advise on that?
Yeah, so there's a few things. There's only actually in reality one solution to it, and the solution is a single payroll, and that's something we've pushed for very strongly, and it isn't moving anywhere quickly because it's the moving between payrolls, and it's not avoidable in a way because often people are due money from their last employer and their new employer, so it's often impossible to get it right. So it's nothing NCHDs are generally doing wrong. It's completely the way the system is set up. So it is something I suppose. Look, it does have a massive impact on emergency tax bill. There is things you can look at about if you're, and that's something we can send out to people who are interested. Details around getting your tax, what you can do to minimize the issue from your side, but you can't deal with it all. The temporary recoverable payment is due to address some of that because we worked out the net effect of emergency tax is about 450 to 500 euro. That's kind of what it works out to be the net effect after you take it off the gross and that kind of thing. So that's what the payment is. It's about 870, 880 euro is added to your gross pay. So that nets down to the net effect. And then what's supposed to happen when the emergency tax is repaid to you, that's taken out. So it's supposed to
And
smooth the whole process across.
that's approved across the boards for all the hospitals in Ireland, is
It
it?
is. It's in it's a contractual term you have. Yeah, it was part of the agreement in 2022. But again, we've had to take that up with sites not paying it. So again, that's something people get in touch with us about because it should happen automatically.
And considering that we're speaking about the tax, do you offer any assistance with the tax and the claims and the complexity of the matter? Because most of us don't understand anything about the tax code, and
Yeah,
I think most of the accountants actually don't understand about it.
like the good news, maybe this is the good news and the bad news, right? The good news is as a PAYE employee, generally
Yeah,
just not like you know what I mean. You don't have very much control over it, which is the good news and the bad news. You know what I mean? Because all your taxes are deducted at source. The only real things you can do is obviously that emergency tax piece. And then what other entitlements you have. So we can't do some system there. Like you're entitled to a flat rate expense as a doctor. So that kind of reduces the amount of tax you pay every year. You're entitled to a credit if you're renting. You're entitled to a credit for health expenses. Do you know what I mean? There's certain things you're entitled to which you can claim. I will say the revenue online service is quite good, but again, it's all time. That's the problem. This is all time, but it is there. And I will say, if you do get some time, you can go back up to 4 years. So you can go claims up to 4 years in the past. And sometimes it's nice to get that check from revenue or to get the payment into revenue from your account. So it is something we can assist you with, go through what your entitlements are, but it's not like I suppose you're not self-employed, so an accountant, like you know what I mean. You shouldn't have overly arduous accounting because again, your employer is doing the heavy lifting there, or should be.
yeah, yeah. And how does that work usually? Does it have to be a member and then
Yeah.
upload all the payslips?
So what
Yeah,
we do two things. So we would do for members is, and I mentioned it earlier. The biggest thing actually isn't the tax side of things. The biggest thing is usually the piece of telling people, okay, here's my timesheets, here's my pay slips. Was I paid appropriately? Because usually deductions aren't too bad unless emergency taxes you've said, but usually deductions are in order. It's actually the other side of going, we will look at your pay slips and go, well, you did 100 hours but only got paid for 80. Do you know what I mean? That's usually the side we're looking at. It's usually what they're pay the pay side rather than the deduction side is where issues arise.
okay, okay, fair enough. Another question is the scale of payment. Um, that you put on as soon as you start working in a hospital here in Ireland if you're coming from abroad. So I think you already mentioned that it's usually every year that you spend in a training accredited training hospital would count.
Yeah,
Is it?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So if you've done, so obviously, depending on where you start, like obviously you start as an SHO or a Reg, wherever you get credit for your time of any time you had in a recognized training hospital abroad. And now also then you get credit for all your time here. So I suppose when you take up your first post, you'd be looking that they usually do have a verification service form or a CV, and they should be looking at that saying, well, look, you have 3 years of experience, so you should start on point four, for example.
Yeah. And when switching from a role to a different role, for example, if you're a Reg and you're switching to an SHO for a
Mhm.
training purpose or a different purpose, um, usually what scale would you come in? Like, for example, your Reg year one or year two?
So then you come
What?
in around mid of the SHO scale. So what you look at is you look at the various points. You look at the points and see what's the closest point on the scale below, but goes up a point. So you shouldn't, if at all possible, you shouldn't have a reduction in salary. But obviously, if you're a Reg 6 and you have active SHO post, you get paid at the
Has
top of
to
the
be
SHO scale.
SHO 7.
Yeah, it has exactly. You can't get paid above the scale, but you should, as far as possible, be paid as close as possible to what you're on before. You don't go back to SHO 1, for example.
Makes sense, yeah. And if you're working as a Reg, how many years does it have to be before changing to a senior Reg on the pay scale?
Well, that's technically senior reg is supposed to be for psychiatry. I know some sites have paid it as a senior reg. It's not a progression. So it's not a piece of, but I do know sites have paid, particularly for long-term regs. They often have placed them on that scale, and that's something that happens rather than being an official practice. So senior reg is supposed to be akin to SPR just for psychiatry.
Okay, okay. Perfect. Let me double check if there's more questions here.
That's okay.
Mm, so there's a question about the public holiday. As you mentioned, it's a bit of a complicated subject. I think most of the hospitals try to avoid it, and most of the sites usually don't pay it unless you ask for it. And the general impression I think is if you're working on that day, you're entitled for a payment or a day off. But if you're not working, you're off on that day, and that's it. And there's no more additional day. And is that
I think to be honest, what usually happens in my experience is sites try to have it that they just if you're off at the public holiday, they will just pay you for that day. So they will treat you the same as say someone in admin who is a Monday to Friday job.
yeah?
So they will normally do that. So they'll pay you for the day, so you're getting the entitlement. They're not giving you that flexibility. So that's the kind of thing sometimes we have to push back on. But it's not a case of so you people usually get paid for them. It's not a case that they don't. It's about whether to give you that flexibility by taking a different time. That's usually the point we have to push back on. And then I said for them when you're working today, which is after the negative of working on a public holiday, is probably the best case scenario because you get paid the double pay and you have the day to take. But that usually is what happens sometimes is for the day when you're not working it, having to go back and say, actually, no, I want the flexibility not to have my day used.
Okay, okay, perfect, perfect. Um, Another question would be um, if there's any difference between the trainee and the non-trainee regarding um, leaves. I think it's only there's more dedicated study days for the trainee.
Yeah, it's probably easier to get if you have the gateway exams and that type of thing. Like that would be it. The only real substantial piece, the biggest change, it kind of probably between trainees and non-trainees would be in relation to the relocation expenses because you have to be in a training scheme to claim the relocation expenses when you move between sites, and that's a revenue rule, unfortunately. So that is probably one of the biggest differences between trainees and non-trainees. The contract otherwise applies. You're entitled to your CSS, TSS, your C-stars, all those type of things. But that probably is the biggest difference. But you are right. For obviously for study leave, if you're in a training scheme, you often will have mapped out what you're going to be doing, what your exams are going to be doing, what your deliverables are. So that's kind of a piece and can be a challenge for non-trainees, kind of try and fit in their activities and often maybe building a portfolio or maybe people who are applying to do a course next year or get into a training scheme next year. That can be a challenge, particularly if you're in a site with a lot of trainees and they kind of see the non-training person is going to fill all the gaps. That can be a challenge.
And sometimes I think the dynamic within the team itself, allowing for more days or priority on taking
Mm.
leaves could be something. There's no magic formula to fix it. It's just I think that's different between each team. Most of the teams don't usually struggle with giving the days off if the team allows, but it's usually an issue when it's a busy service.
Mm.
It's a site where not enough people are around and available for these days, and then taking these leaves, I think, then becomes an issue.
Yeah, I think absolutely, and I suppose that's why we what we try to achieve with the 10 days. You know what I mean? That it was a minimum piece because we absolutely are encouraged. We don't want this. We don't want there to be a trainee versus non-trainee issue, and it kind of is allow everyone to kind of upskill and develop and progress. So you're absolutely, but there's challenges, and there's no point pretending there isn't, and it is, and it's like hopefully good communication and respect between trainees and kind of trying to find the thing that works is the way to go there. But you're not wrong.
Okay. One of the last question here would
Okay.
be about locums.
Yeah.
If you're working as a trainee doctor in a training program, I think the general impression is you're not allowed to work within a locum within
Yeah,
any.
there's specific rule. Generally, that is the case. The medical council have things about working outside your training post. There are restrictions on working outside your training post. So that's kind of a medical council training scheme issue. Yeah, there are, and obviously for everybody as well. As ironic as it might seem, your employer is also allowed to say you shouldn't be working outside the legal working levels that are allowed by doing a second job. There is an irony in that. I completely appreciate, but it is there.
Perfect, perfect. I think we've covered all bases
Hmm.
there. Yeah, most of the questions here. Let me just double check again.
I think somebody was asking about sick leave for a child there as well. I can see on the questions.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's
Would
two.
that? Yeah.
So
Sorry.
there's a few different things. It's not, there's something, first thing, there's something called force majeure leave. It's a statutory leave type, and that's generally, it's 3 days a year or 5 days in a 2 year period. And that's for an emergency situation where a child or a partner or someone was sick and you had to be there. And again, that's paid. And then there's another thing called, there's a compassionate leave for looking at leave for medical care, which is unpaid leave. So it's 5 unpaid days in a 12-month period. So that's not sick leave, is supposed to be yourself. Whereas there will be the two leave types you're talking about for a sick child, for example.
Okay. Okay. Perfect. Let's just double check with everyone else.
I think that's a good sign I've answered every question, hopefully. Um,
You've done great. It was very good having you with us today, Tom. And again, thank you. We appreciate having a few minutes to say for us. I know it's not easy in the middle of the week on a busy schedule to say a few hours. So it's very appreciated. It might come as simple information for you, but it means great to us. Appreciate it. And if you just give us the link again for the membership and to join
I,
again
I will
for
absolutely get
everyone.
to that. Yeah, I will. I'll reshare my screen there. But I would, and again, I would say thank you for the opportunity. It was great to talk to you all. And again, I hope you found it useful. And again, what I'd say is NCHDs at IMO is the, if you have queries to get in touch, that we kind of, like, again, we have a team there, and I kind of, we want to help. We know how tough it is for you guys and how busy you are. So if we can kind of remove any of that kind of stress or stuff, we're happy to do. And we again appreciate your time. And I hope you're all done and logging off now for the evening, because it's what, nearly 9 o'clock. So